C, approval of the July 27, 2022 meeting minutes.
For approval, Mr. Chair.
Got a motion by Commissioner Kleen. Can I get support? Support by Commissioner Dodd. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say aye. Ayes have it. Next item, Madam Clerk.
D, unfinished business. There is none listed. Item 1, under new business, communication from Marcella Cora, Wayne County Legislative Auditor General, forwarding the final copy of the Office of Legislative Auditor General's Performance Audit Report on the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services contract to provide medical examiner services.
I'd like to welcome our Auditor General, Ms. Marcy Cora, her staff, and her guest. Ms. Cora, please proceed.
Marcy Cora, Auditor General, and I'll have staff introduce themselves.
Mike Sosnowski, Audit Manager.
Crystal Thomas, Supervisory Auditor.
Ray, Principal Senior Auditor.
And we also have the Director from the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services. I'll have her introduce herself.
Got to hit the button, please. There. You got it. Go ahead.
My name is Melita Jordan. I'm the Director for the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services.
Welcome.
And you have Kamal Keparu. I'm online. I'm a finance director for the department.
What you have before you today, this is the Office of Legislative Auditor General's Performance Report on the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services, Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. This engagement was on our audit plan for the 2022 calendar year. It was also on our audit plan of 2021. However, we didn't have time to get to it in 2021. Our goal of this engagement was to determine if the contractor was in compliance with the contract between the county and the University of Michigan Health Services. We kind of geared this engagement similar to the one we had for contractual services for the jail medical services. The engagement objectives were to assess contractor compliance with key contract provisions, assess controls over revenues and expenditures, and assess processes for providing medical examiner services. We're on the scope and methodology slide, which is slide number 3. The engagement scope encompasses the period of October 1st, 2019 through April 30th, 2022. This performance audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. Our methodology included, we conducted interviews with the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services and medical examiner staff. We performed inquiries, observation, analytical procedures. We reviewed the contract, public act, and various documents. We obtained access to the case manager system. This is a system where everything within the medical examiner's office is maintained electronically. And this was to obtain real-time data. We performed various audit tests. We observed a physical count of the decedents that were at the medical examiner's office at a point in time. And then we reconciled that inventory to the case manager system. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Sosnowski. He'll go through the background and I'll be adding to the discussion.
Thank you. The MEO's office is a division within the Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services. The office was created in accordance with Act number 181 of the Michigan Public Act of 1953 as amended. Their mission is to identify, investigate, and determine cause and manner of death of people who die within Wayne County under the circumstances or conditions outlined in the Act. We'll cover that in a couple of slides. Their purpose is to provide forensic death investigations, autopsies, and toxicology services in order to document on a timely and accurate basis the cause and manner of death for individuals who died within the county. The financial information for the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office is recorded in Business Unit 64800. It is a general fund account. The budget for fiscal 2021 was $7.85 million. Actual expenditures are about $7.6 million. $6.5 million, or about 85% of the expenditures, were the fees paid to the University of Michigan Health Services for their professional and services under the contract. An additional 1.1 million was expended, which include personnel costs, contractual services, including the chargebacks and operating transfers for debt services. And this is shown on the chart on page 6 of the report.
You, staff, can you mute the person? Okay, thank you. Please proceed, Mike.
Thank you. As I said, the office is a general fund operation and gets a support for its operations. Also receives revenue for some fees for services, autopsy reports, reimbursement from government agencies and other revenues. In fiscal 2021, they received about $940,000 in revenue. Of this, 84% or $793,000 were for autopsy report fees. Another $115,000 was reimbursed from Monroe County for autopsy services provided to them. And again, there's a chart on page 7 that details this. As I mentioned, the office performs its services under the provisions of the State of Michigan's Medical Examiners Act, which prescribes the powers and duties of county medical examiners. Under the act, the medical examiner has to investigate the cause and manner of deaths of individuals under circumstances as identified in the act. These types of circumstances include death as a result of violence, unexplained, unexpected, and or sudden deaths, deaths caused by drugs, deaths without medical attendance, deaths in custody in a prison, in custody or prison, and then deaths as a result of an abortion. The types of exams performed by the medical examiner's office include either a complete autopsy, a limited autopsy, or external examination. Autopsies are performed to collect evidence, document any findings, and determine the cause and manner of death in any sudden, unexpected, unexplained, or suspicious death. An external examination and limited autopsies are performed when sufficient information documenting the cause and manner of death is available for the pathologist to certify the death and meet local legal standards, or where religious practices request a limited examination. In addition, the MEO will provide private autopsies for a fee when requested by the legal next of kin. This is the performance for the past 3 years, fiscal years, by the MEO. This is reported cases, cremation permits, cases to the MEO, that's cases bodies actually brought into the morgue, autopsies and examinations. You can see in fiscal 2020, there was a spike, in reported cases, and this is attributable to the COVID pandemic.
If I could just add to that too, on the cremation permits, any individual that's cremated within the county, a cremation permit has to be authorized through the medical examiner's office, whether the body comes into the medical examiner's office or not.
And then Commissioner Kling had a question or comment.
Yeah, quick question on the chart on the medical examiner's office performance by year. What does cases transported to the Wayne County Medical Examiner office mean? What does that mean?
These are cases where the decedent actually comes into the medical examiner's office for either an autopsy or examination. What may happen is the medical examiner may go out to a scene, then a determination is made as to whether the decedent should be transported back to the medical examiner's office, or if they could be released at the scene to the funeral home or to pick up the body.
So these are cases where the family is requesting?
No, these are cases where the medical examiner himself or the investigator at the scene determined that the individual needs to be transported to the medical examiner's office, either for an autopsy or examination.
As opposed to a hospital?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed, Mike.
Some statistical information we gathered with Oakland County versus Wayne County, and this is calendar year 2021. This is on page 8 of the report. And this is reported deaths, cases to the MEO, those are bodies transported to the MEO, and then autopsies, both full and limited. And as you can see, Wayne County has a greater number of each type of statistic for those years compared to Oakland County.
I can just add to the numbers, and didn't show up on the slides, but for reported deaths in Wayne County was 16,277 compared to 8,768 with Oakland County. For cases to the medical examiner's office, it was 3,610 for Wayne County and 2,129 for Oakland County. Then autopsies, both full and limited, Wayne County was 2,720 compared to the 823 with Oakland County.
Getting into the engagement results.
I could add first, is there any questions related to the background section?
Getting into the engagement results, our first objective was to assess the contractor's compliance with key contract provisions. There was a 5-year agreement between the County of Wayne and University of Michigan Health System. This contract expires September 30th this year. And we noted that generally both parties adhered with their respective contractual obligations. However, we did find areas where the obligations were not complied with, and these included the MEO facility, the condition of it, staff certifications at the MEO, benchmarking statistics, and insurance coverage. First issue is the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office facility not adequately maintained. This is on pages 10 and 11 of the report. Per the contract, the county is responsible for the maintenance and updating of the facility, which includes heating, cooling, electrical, and plumbing. According to MEO management, the current facility is in a state of major disrepair. Some of these issues include heating and cooling issues, which can affect the operations and condition of decedents at the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. Pipes keep freezing, drops in water pressure, which affects the performance of autopsies. There was one instance of note between June 26th of 21 and June 28th of 21, where loss of power increased cooler temperature, which adversely affected the condition of decedents in those coolers. I should preface this. We talk about NAME, and I should define what NAME is. NAME is the National Association of Medical Examiners. It was founded in 1966. It is the body that promulgates standards for pathologists, and it also provides accreditation services. And to be accredited by NAME means that you are working at the utmost ability, and the public can rely upon your operations. So at any rate, NAME conducted an accreditation inspection in December of 21 and cited certain conditions with the MEO facilities. They noted it was not structurally sound, as it is in need of repairs. The heating and cooling systems are not very effective, and this could impact the daily operations of the medical examiner. These deficiencies contributed to the MEO receiving a provisional accreditation as opposed to a full accreditation. County's Capital Development and Building Administration Division determined that capital improvements were necessary to the facility to keep it from suffering further deterioration. In October of 21, a contract was executed for architectural and design services with a firm called DLZ in the amount of $526,000. Bids are expected to go out in October of this year, and costs for these renovations and improvements could range anywhere from an estimated $4.2 million to $4.8 million. Now, during the renovations, the operations of the medical examiner's office will have to be moved. And the plans are to utilize the Wayne State Mortuary Science Facility. There's not enough capacity there. So consequently, 6 to 7 refrigerated trucks will have to be employed to store the bodies and used to transport the decedents to the mortuary science facility during the autopsy process. Consequently, lack of adequate and ongoing maintenance over the years has contributed to the deterioration of the facility, impact on the performance of daily operations, and as I noted, a provisional accreditation from NAME. Okay, our recommendation number 2021-01 is a significant deficiency. We define those later on in the report. We recommend that the management, along with senior executive management within the county and Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services, work with the Buildings Division in the interim period to ensure that the facility is properly maintained and repaired in order to ensure continued operations until a decision is made regarding the location of future operations.
If I may, Mike,
Yes.
and appreciate it. Although a audit was underway, already began before it was brought to my attention, I actually found out about this thanks to Karen Drew from Channel 4. And anyway, it elevated this audit to the point that everybody in Wayne County is definitely interested. And hopefully we can learn from the past and these things don't happen again in the future, because we're not just talking with items, we're talking about, human beings here from all different kinds of circumstances. So for what it's worth, I appreciate the investigative work that she's done on this and helping us to, obviously we're hearing that we're going to spend millions in building a new facility and make sure that we have the software, the employees and all those sorts of folks to make this, less difficult on families of the deceased. But please proceed, Mike, but thank you.
If I could add to this recommendation, a lot is going to depend upon what direction the county takes with the agreement with Wayne State University, since the agreement with University of Michigan expires in September 30th of this year. But it's important that until a decision is made as far as facility, that we ensure the facility that we currently have is maintained for the decedents that are coming into that facility.
Sure. And hopefully we've learned from the issues with U of M, and Wayne State moves us in a very positive direction. But thank you. Please proceed, Mike.
Our second issue is inadequate staffing and board certification of pathologists, pages 11 and 13 of the report. The contract between the county and UMHS requires autopsies be performed by pathologists who are certified by the American Board of Pathology. Also, staffing levels should be sufficient or adequate to obtain accreditation from NAME. As I said, the NAME accreditation or inspection in December 21 noted 2 deficiencies in this regard. They noted that 11 pathologists were required by the office. At the time, there was only 7, so a shortfall of 4. 2 of the 7 pathologists were not board certified. However, subsequently, 1 did become certified. So that leaves 1 that was not. So not maintaining adequate staffing levels within the office could impact daily operations should existing staff become unavailable to work. Now, also not ensuring that all board pathologists or not all pathologists are board certified, it's a violation of the contract, and not meeting the certification requirements could possibly result in the medical examiner not receiving full accreditation from me.
I guess to that point, if I may, Mike, like what procedures do they have in place to make sure that all pathologists in the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office obtain American Board of Pathology certification?
I would defer that to Ms. Jordan.
We do require proof of their certification, and that information does come to the department as well as to the university to let us know that that person has passed their boards and that they are clearly certified by NAME.
I should preface the previous remarks by saying that the MEO noted that it is difficult to get physicians to work in Michigan. They have worked with a physician search firm to acquire pathologists. They're still continuing to work with that firm. When the contract expires at the end of this September, it's not certain if they will still be able to obtain the services of that search firm. So anyway, our recommendation 2021-02 again.
Add to that too, Mike. Also, based on our discussion with the medical examiner's office officials, it's been noted that the number of certified forensic pathologists in the United States is only about 500 for the entire country. So I think it's like a lot of occupations in the United States, there is a shortage. So that does contribute to the issue of not being able to get the certified pathologist. We need to strive to meet the recommendations.
I could also just add to that, in addition to that, in some states, there has been that situation because of a severe shortage that the federal government have sent in also individuals from the National Guard who are certified to provide the services. And so again, we are continuing to explore all possibilities as well as working with other organizations that do provide pathologists through temporary services. And so we are exploring these things, but again, as mentioned, it is a national shortage of pathologists in this country.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. And just to add to what our health director says, not only is it a national shortage now, it's been like that for a long time. I can remember over the years, the one thing that we've had problems recruiting were pathologists. So this is not just something new. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Our recommendation 2021-02, again, a significant deficiency. We recommend that management within the office continue to work with physician search firms to acquire staff levels sufficient to ensure the continuity of daily operations as well as obtaining full name accreditation, and then implement procedures to ensure that all pathologists become American Board of Pathology certified. Next issue, medical investigator board certification, pages 13 and 14 of the report. Again, the contract requires compliance with NAME standards. One standard requires the majority of medical legal investigators working longer than 5 years in the office be certified by the American Board of Medical Death Investigators. The NAME accreditation inspection noted that the majority of these investigators who worked longer than 5 years in the office were not certified by the American Board of Medical Death Investigators. That's ABMDI for the abbreviation. Currently, there are 13 investigators working in the office, 8 working longer than 5 years. Only 3 of the 8 are certified, therefore they're not compliant with the NAME standard.
Could I add to this also too? These investigators should possess the specialized knowledge and skill because they are of vital importance to the medical examiner's office because they are the individuals that are going to the scenes to investigate the death at the scene. They document all the information. They supervise the collection of the remains at the scene. So they play a vital role in helping to not only determine who the decedent is, their next of kin, and help determine what was the cause and manner of death. And they're the liaison between the medical examiner's office and law enforcement agencies. So it is a vital role in the organization.
Also add to that, please.
Yes.
A number of these investigators also are former and or retired police officers and individuals who have that type of background as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Go ahead, Mike.
A recommendation 2020-03, also a significant deficiency. We recommend management within the medical examiner's office implement policies and procedures to ensure that medical investigators who have worked in the office greater than 5 years obtain either the registered or board certified credential from the American Board of Medical Death Investigators. Our next issue, benchmark reporting requirements, pages 14 and 15 of the report. The contract requires UMHS to report quarterly on the average time periods for processing histology, amending a case, and issuing final cause of death with average times complying with NAME standards. Also, the benchmarking statistics should be submitted annually every November 1st. NAME requires the preparation of an annual report to include total cases reported, accepted, examined, autopsied, and the cause of death sorted by the manner of death. The annual statistical information was shared with the county and NAME. However, a formal report was not prepared and submitted. The contract provisions only require the medical examiner to report on the operations of the office and not provide a formal report to the county. We noted that other local medical examiners' offices do prepare annual reports, and they include these on their websites for the public to view.
Could add to this also too, the contract was vague as to the type of reports They should be submitted, whether formal or informal. What we would recommend, and Mike's will get to the recommendation soon, is any future contracts that we put some specific information regarding quarterly reports to be submitted, not only to the county, but to the commission. Also, Mike's will get into publishing the annual report, but included it within the report. The University of Michigan does meet quarterly with the department officials. They go over all the statistical information, and we've even included the agendas and minutes as an addenda to the response from the department. So you'll be able to see the type of discussions that do take place at the meetings. We're just looking, and we believe if something is more formal, that's also submitted to the commission. And I think that if you go on to other county websites, the medical examiner's offices do publish their annual reports. So if that's something we can do, I think a long time ago in the past, the county also did publish their annual reports on a website, on the county's website. But you'll see in the back, there are lengthy discussions quarterly with county officials and the University of Michigan. So we did include them as part of their response.
So to the department, they plan on posting an annual report, including benchmarking stats, like on a countywide website?
Yes, we actually do have the information, as the Auditor General mentioned, and we will begin to make sure that that is published to the website. In addition to, I certainly do agree and concur with the recommendation that we provided not only to the commission and other key stakeholders, but in addition for public awareness that it is posted, and more importantly, as we provide an annual report as well. So yes, many states do provide an annual report. I would probably suggest that the reason why it was not done, that was previously being done, probably is because of the staffing situation. It is a document that does take quite a bit of time to put together, as well as to be able to get that published and sent. But I think that is something that, again, we certainly can make sure happen. That is something that will be included as well in the new operating agreement with Wayne State.
Basically, the recommendation has been addressed, so we'll go on to the next slide. Another issue is inadequate insurance coverage, pages 15 and 16 of the report. The contract requires both parties to maintain insurance coverages. We noted that the county has maintained their required commercial general liability insurance coverage. However, UMHS professional liability insurance coverage contains an aggregate coverage of $3 million. The contract requires a $5 million aggregate coverage. So by not having the required insurance coverage, UMHS is not in compliance with the contract and could expose the county to potential liabilities should a settlement arise in excess of the aggregate of $3 million.
If I could add to that, the ensuring that the insurance coverage that is required by the contract is actually the insurance that's being provided is not alone to this department. We find it throughout most of our audits that there seems to be a lack of ensuring that the insurance coverage is what the contracts are requiring. So this would be a recommendation for the Department of Risk Management to ensure on the future contract that there is follow-up to make sure the insurance coverage is adequate. But as I said, it's not just to this area. We find it countywide.
Could I get a response from the department?
Yes, if I could also respond to that to say that I did follow up on that, and you're absolutely correct that the department did have its insurance as well. I did follow up with the University of Michigan as well, and it was my understanding that they were providing that information to show that they did have the appropriate amount of insurance. But I will also say, when I went back and reviewed the documents, it was clear that the documents were signed off by all parties. And so I'm not sure at what point the insurance is looked at prior to the document with the contract was signed. So I don't have that in front of me at this time, but I have requested that from the university to substantiate that they did have the appropriate amount of insurance at that time.
Or would you like to respond to that?
No, I would agree with this. It's a countywide issue that when contracts are applied, and sometimes when there's a renewal on the contract, somehow the insurance may not be the insurance that's required at the beginning of the contract. So it just needs a process in place at the county to make sure insurance coverage is per the contract requirements.
Commissioner Colleen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Auditor General Cora. I understand the countywide thing you're talking about, but In this specific case, the University of Michigan was contractually obligated to provide adequate insurance, and they did not. Is there any evidence that the county knew that the insurance that they had was inadequate as far as the requirements of the contract goes?
No, I would say it's just a lack of oversight in the Department of Risk Management, ensuring that it's adequate. It could have been adequate for the first year, and coverages may have been reduced, but we're not
Didn't
sure.
run across any letters or memos from University of Michigan to the county to say, hey, this is what our insurance coverage is?
No.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
So this is recommendation 2021-05, control deficiency. We basically have covered the recommendation. So I'm going to move on now. That ends my portion of the presentation. I'll turn this over now to Andrew Gray.
Objective 2 was to assess the controls over revenue and expenditures, controls over payments from the county to
Pull your mic down.
controls over.
Pull your mic to you. All right, you got it.
Objective 2 was to assess the controls over revenue and expenditures, controls over payments from the county to the U of M Health Services professional and operational services appear to be adequate. We noted that all payments for the period of October 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2021 were in accordance with contract provisions. However, we noted controls over the receipt of revenue for services performed by the medical examiner's office could be strengthened. To that condition.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
If you go into page 16 of your report, and we structured this procedure for our audit similar to we have with all of other contractual service agreements. And we verified what the contract monthly payment was supposed to be. And for the medical examiners, there was 2 monthly fees. One was for base professional services. The other was for operational professional services. Then we compared what we paid from the county to the University of Michigan Health Services to ensure it was in compliance with the contract. And we found no instances where the amount that was supposed to be paid to the University of Michigan, it was indeed what was supposed to be paid. There was per the contract that if they went over certain services that were allowed for autopsies, there was an additional fee that could have been paid, but the county never exceeded, or the medical examiner's office, University of Michigan, never exceeded the number of services that could be performed. So everything per fee per services was accurate in compliance with the contract.
Our observed condition was the lack of controls over the cash receipts. During fiscal year 2021, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office received $938,789 in revenue. Of that amount, $793,159 were from autopsy report fees. Of the remaining $145,630, approximately $12,880 was from the state of Michigan for infant autopsies and $114,750 as reimbursement from Monroe County for autopsy services as reported in the general ledger. Miscellaneous revenue of $18,000 from the state of Michigan for violent death data. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office only accepts business checks, money orders, and cashier checks in payment for the services. These remittances are primarily received by mail. During our review of the cash receipts processes, we noted that one individual receives and opens the mail and distributes the checks, money orders, and/or cashier checks to designated staff, which is approximately 4 other employees, for processing of the services by the staff person. Once the service is performed, the staff person that performed the services places the checks or money orders in a lockbox. The checks and money orders are retrieved by the same individual who originally distributed them. This same individual then completes the deposit slip and makes the deposit. An adequate set of internal controls over cash receipts requires a proper segregation of duties to ensure the cash receipt processes are separated among staff in order to mitigate the risk of misappropriation of funds. Restrictive endorsement of all checks, money orders, and/or cashier checks upon receipt ensure that they cannot be cashed by another party. Maintaining a log of all checks, money orders, and/or cashier checks received ensures proper oversight and monitoring of all funds and safeguarding of checks or money orders by one individual whose responsibility is the custody of funds. We noted the following internal control weaknesses in the process: a lack of segregation of duties, as the same individual opens the mail, prepares the deposit slip, and deposits the checks and money orders. A log is not maintained listing all checks or money orders when they are received and the service is requested. Checks or money orders are not immediately endorsed upon receipt. Checks or money orders are provided to investigators that are to perform the services rather than being secured until a deposit is prepared. No second verification is performed to ensure the deposit is accurate and includes the incoming checks or money orders. Deposits are made approximately every 2 weeks, averaging approximately $30,000 per deposit, and deposits are not transported in a secure manner. Not implementing proper internal controls over cash receipts increases the risk of loss, theft, or misappropriation of funds. Recommendation 2021-06 identified as a control deficiency, which can be found on page 18 of the report. We recommend that management within the medical examiner's office implement the proper internal controls over cash receipts for services provided and A, establish segregation of duties so the same individual does not open the mail, prepare the deposit slip, and make the deposit, and B, ensure all checks or money orders are recorded in a log immediately upon receipt, that they are restrictively endorsed immediately upon receipt, that they are maintained in a secure location by one individual until they are deposited, that a second verification of the deposit is performed, and that deposits are made at a minimum of twice per week and transported in a secure manner.
I could add to this too. This was one of the first findings we found during our walkthrough. When we brought this to the attention of the department, I believe they immediately took action to implement the controls in place so that when the checks come in, they're handled properly and there's not a risk of being lost, stolen, or misappropriated. So I wanted to commend the department for immediately taking the action to fix this.
That brings us to objective 3, which was to assess processes for providing medical examiner services. Our first observation was to ensure all pertinent information was in the case manager database and is complete. This observation can be found on page 20 of the report. Our review of the information provided in the case manager report showed that in most instances, the date when a decedent was received or released by the MEO was generally included in the case manager database. However, we did note a few instances during our review of the other data fields related to the receipt or release of a decedent for which pertinent information was missing. The first is missing information related to the receipt of a body. Policies and procedures require the medical examiner investigator to document the date, time, delivery service, person receiving the body, location, presence of clothing and property, along with the security seal number. We noted that generally this information was documented in the case manager system. However, we noted 27 instances where the decedent was listed in the report but did not have a check-in date, although the decedent was transported to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office. Second was missing information related to the release of a body. Policies and procedures require the autopsy technician to update the case manager database with release information, such as checkout date, time, clothing released, funeral home released to. They have a code assigned for each funeral home, so they are to include that code. Who released the body, the condition of the body, and who the body was removed by. This information is imperative to ensure the correct body is released to an authorized funeral director selected by the next of kin. However, we determined that this information was not input in all instances. Some of the missing information included missing checkout dates, listing the funeral home the decedent was released to, the funeral home representative, and whether or not clothing was released. Our next observation was missing information related to the condition of the bodies. When a body is released, the status of the body, for example, the degree of decomposition, is assessed by the autopsy technician and is communicated to the funeral director. This information is documented in the case manager database. We noted 730 instances where a body was released, but the condition of the body upon release was not noted. Next, there was missing information related to the notification of the next of kin. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office is ultimately responsible for notification of the next of kin. Medical examiner policies and procedures require that once a case is assigned, a medical examiner case number and the medical legal investigator must identify and notify the next of kin. The notification can be accomplished by a telephone call to the family, in person at the scene of death, at a separate visit to the family, or in a written correspondence. This notification must be documented in the case manager database. Of the 8,068 identified decedents, in 3,241 instances, the next of kin notified field was blank. Because the field was blank, we were not able to determine whether the next of kin was indeed notified. However, a review of the checkout notes field referenced a next of kin in many of these instances.
Hey, can I jump in there? On several of these items that you listed, is that related to software, or is it shortage of personnel? Is it both? how do we, moving forward, deal with this issue? These issues, it's not, there's more than one.
I could add, it's
Sure.
a combination of software, making sure information is entered correctly, oversight and making sure that information is entered. Just to add some context to this, we go back to slide 30. As part of our procedures, the medical examiner's office uses case manager database. This is a web-based software that tracks all the information for every case that comes into the medical examiner's office. They use this as a chain of custody. All the information reports are uploaded into the system. So it's a very important piece of the operations of the medical examiner's office. So as part of our procedures for the period of October 1st, 2019 through December 31st of 2021, we obtained a download of this system of all individuals that came into the medical examiner's office so that we could determine the accuracy of the database, because I believe having accurate information is vital for the office. For the period of our review, there was, as Andy said, 8,068 decedents that came into the medical examiner's office. So we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of data that was in the system, making sure that the fields were complete and accurate, because you need to have accurate information for the public. On to page 31. This is just a little bit of background information from the case manager system based on our analysis of this information. Of the 8,068 cases that came into the medical examiner's office during our scope period that was on the report provided to us, at the time of our review, because it's always fluidly changing, bodies come in, bodies coming out. The date we received the database, there was 250 decedents that were in, based on the database, would be at the medical examiner's office. We also did some analysis and we determined of them 8,068, once you take out the 250, 6,720 or 86% of the decedents that came into the medical examiner's office were released in 10 days or less. There was 752 or 10% of the decedents that were there greater than 10 days but less than 50 days. Decedents greater than 10 but less than 100 was 110 decedents, or 1%. And the decedents that were there greater than 100 days, there was 236, or 3%. So I think that's important information to see, that you got 86% of bodies coming to the medical examiner's office actually were released within 10 days.
And I appreciate that. So generally speaking, what's the hiccup with the funeral homes and the board?
We get to that later in the
Oh, I'm
report
sorry.
regarding the
I'm jumping the
cremation.
gun. Sorry.
And as Andy went through the information on the pertinent information in the case manager system, the number of incidents where data was missing was minimal, but there are some fields that we believe are so vital that they have the accurate information. That would be the decedent coming into the medical examiner's office, because you want to make sure that if somebody was going to call, that if an investigator were to go and look into the database, they can find that individual, find the date where they were there. Same thing with the date that the decedent was released, because it's important to have information when a decedent is actually being released to the funeral home, so you're able to track that individual. Some of the other important fields is the condition of the body. I believe, as Andy indicated, there was 750 instances where the condition of the body being released was not indicated in the database. This is vital information, because if some questions were to arise later on, at least it's determine what that condition of the body was when it left the medical examiner's office. In case something happened once it left, at least we can account for the body condition when it left. And then as far as the next of kin, as Andy indicated, there was 3,241 instances where the next of kin, the field that was supposed to have it was blank, but it's not to say that a next of kin notification wasn't some other place in the database. But if the correct information is in the right fields, I think it will help the office in their function. But as I said, we had very minimal items that weren't complete, but we just believe it's important to have as much information accurate in the database, because that is what the medical examiner's office uses for their function.
Thank you.
Sorry, I
Audit
didn't mean to
helps.
interrupt you. I just want to put some context.
Please proceed.
We're on
The
page
result-
37, the recommendation, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
As a result of the conditions noted, we concluded that the medical examiner's office has not implemented review and monitoring procedures to verify and ensure all pertinent information in the case manager system is complete. While the number of instances may be minimal, responses to queries from families of the deceased and/or the general public could be negatively impacted. Incomplete or inaccurate information could be provided to the medical legal community or public, specifically families of the deceased. Which brings us to recommendation 21-07, identified as a significant deficiency on page 21 of our report. We recommend management within the medical examiner's office implement policy and procedures to ensure information within the case manager database is periodically reviewed for accuracy and completeness in order to ensure the integrity of the information within the system. Next condition observed was a lack of reconciliation between physical inventory and the case manager database. When the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office receives a death notification.
Andy, could we hold on a moment? I think
Sure.
Ms. Jordan had a comment.
I just wanted to go back. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
just wanted
go
to
ahead,
go
Ms.
back
Jordan.
and to respond.
Sure.
And I certainly concur that all information is very, very important in terms of the database being filled and completed. However, I did want to make note that in some instances, for an example, you noted in some places that there was not one, the next of kin not notified. And as you mentioned, it does not mean that it did not happen, unfortunately, because again, the volume, you think about 8,000 that did come through that was looked at and that they were as documented here. It was really not a large number that was not actually seen. So I wanted to say that in terms of the bodies going out or being recorded, remember some of the bodies that came in of the decedents were skeletal bodies. And so therefore they would not be clothing. So in all instances, there's not always clothing to be documented. However, where there was missing, probably once again, due to the number of bodies that do come in and the number of autopsies are being performed on a daily basis and the staffing that surrounds all of those things. But I certainly concur with you that it is important that we capture all of the information so that we are able to not only from a legal perspective to be able to answer questions, but more importantly is to give families the response that they need of how that body came in, as well as how it left the medical examiner's office and how it was picked up by a funeral director. So I certainly concur with you, but I also want to say that, again, humans perform the work. And so there is always an opportunity for some level of error. And I don't think that we should negate that in terms of large numbers of people that's being seen, procedures being done, that there is an opportunity for error.
I would agree with that.
And a lack of reconciliation between physical inventory and the case manager database. When the medical examiner's office receives a death notification, a case number is assigned in the case manager database. It is used as the book of record for tracking chain of custody, as well as the autopsy/investigative process. If the MEO decides a body should be transported to the morgue, it is classified as ordered in the case manager database. Once received at the morgue, a check-in date is entered into case manager. If the MEO decides the body does not have to be transported to the morgue, it is classified as released in case manager, and no check-in or check-out date is entered into the database. Decedents received by the medical examiner's office are required to be maintained in coolers or freezers until they are released for disposition, for example, a burial or cremation. Upon arrival at the medical examiner's office, a perpetual record of each decedent's intake, assigned case number, location, and release activity is recorded in the cooler summary inventory, a Microsoft Word document maintained by the lead autopsy technician. On a weekly basis, the lead autopsy technician completes a physical inventory of every decedent contained in the coolers and freezers. The technician will verify each decedent and their corresponding location and case number on the cooler summary inventory worksheet. If any discrepancies are observed, the technician reconciles the case number on the body bag to the toe tag accompanying the decedent. Upon completion of the physical reconciliation, the results of the physical inventory are updated in the cooler summary inventory worksheet. However, we noted that the perpetual cooler summary inventory document was not reconciled with the decedent identified as remaining at the medical examiner's office in the case manager database. The audit team observed a physical inventory conducted on April 5th, 2022, and attempted to reconcile the cooler summary inventory worksheet to the decedents identified as remaining at the MEO per the case manager system. Based on a review, there were 23 decedents that should have been physically at the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office on April 5th, 2022 during that inventory, based on no checkout dates present in the case manager database. We reviewed the case files to determine the actual disposition of those decedents. We noted the following conditions. Decedents with check-in dates, but were not transported to the medical examiner's office. We confirmed these 5 decedents should not be in the physical inventory, as they were never transported to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office and therefore should not have a checkout date. However, these cases also should not have been assigned a check-in date within the case manager system. Next, we observed decedents with no check-in dates and no checkout dates. We confirmed that these 2 decedents would not be in the physical inventory as they were never transported to the medical examiner's office. While they did not have either a check-in date or a checkout date, they should have been excluded from the database. We attempted to determine why they were entered in the database, but were not able to do so. We observed decedents with check-in dates, but were actually released to a funeral home. We confirmed these 5 decedents would not be in the physical inventory, as we confirmed they were released to the funeral homes. However, the database was not updated to reflect release date. Next, we had unknown tissues and decedents. We noted in some instances, the physical inventory reflects all unknown decedents, and in some instances, tissue. According to medical examiner personnel, those remains that require refrigeration are included in the weekly physical inventory counts. Those that do not are stored in the anthropology room and are not part of the weekly physical inventory. However, we identified one unknown decedent that was listed in the database without a checkout date, but was not included in the physical inventory. Upon further review, we determined the partial remains of this decedent never entered the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office. We also found that the remaining 10 unknown tissue samples that were listed in the database with no checkout date, 5 were non-human remains. For one exhibit, the partial remains never came to the medical examiner's office. For 2 of the exhibits, they were included in the anthropology room inventory. 1 exhibit of partial remains was accounted for through the chain of custody documentation, and 1 exhibit of partial remains needed further investigation to determine the location. They were not included in the weekly physical inventory. Next, we observed decedents listed in the database with a checkout date, but not physically in the inventory. We identified 1 decedent that had a checkout date, but was physically in the inventory. Based on the case notes, the decedent was released to a funeral home, but due to a conflict with the family, the decedent was returned to the medical examiner's office, but the return was not reflected in the case manager database. Based on our review, we noted the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office has not implemented a process or procedures for the reconciliation of the weekly physical body counts with the electronic records in the case manager database. In addition, there is not a process to ensure that remains stored in the anthropology room are also included in the weekly physical inventory and are likewise reconciled to the electronic database. Based on the conditions noted, not reconciling the physical inventory of decedents to the electronic record has resulted in errors going undetected and the electronic records not accurately reflecting the disposition of all cases. As such, the electronic records database may not be consistently relied upon to provide accurate information regarding inventory or to address inquiries from the general public. Which brings us to recommendation number 2021-08, identified as a significant deficiency on page 23 of our report. We recommend management within the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office, A, perform weekly reconciliations of physical body counts to the case manager database, including those stored in the anthropology room. The reconciliation should be performed by someone independent of the weekly body count. B, follow up on all discrepancies and ensure case manager accurately reflects the disposition of all cases. And C, instead of the term released, implement a unique code to classify bodies that are never ordered in to be transported to the morgue. Our next observation.
If I could add on to this one, Andy. I wanted to make sure everybody understood when we did our reconciliation between the physical bodies that were actually in the medical examiner's office to the database, because it was to ensure that all bodies within the medical examiner's office were accounted for. As we indicated, we identified 23 that based on our audit procedures should have been there that weren't. But I want to be clear that based on our additional work going through the case files and the case summaries, we were able to account for all the bodies that should have been there or shouldn't have been there. It was more of errors within the database that hadn't been corrected, or how a body was coded as the body never should have come into the medical examiner's office, but was coded as if it did come in. So there was no errors with missing bodies or anything to that. It was more of errors in the database. And that way, if you, on a go-forward basis, if a reconciliation is done on a periodic basis between those physical bodies to the database, it will help the medical examiner's office catch errors within their database and ensure there isn't any missing bodies.
So going forward, do we plan on doing like a performance or a weekly reconciliation between body counts and case management database, that sort of thing?
If the medical examiner's office can come up with a periodic reconciliation, we're not saying it has to be weekly, but if they could come up with a time frame that they could do some reconciliation. Because it will take some time, so it's not something that they can do on a daily basis.
I see you nodding your head, so I think the department's agreeing with us. So
That's
okay,
correct. We
thank you very
concur with
much.
that, and we'll make sure that it is implemented for sure, that there is a way to reconcile. But I appreciate the comment that, again, that we are letting all know, as well as the public know, that there was no body that was not found or identified. That's important to state.
Please proceed.
Next is our observation of unknown and unclaimed decedents and the notification of next of kin. Unclaimed decedents are those who have been identified, but either next of kin has not been identified or the next of kin has not claimed the body for release. Unknown decedents are those where a positive identification has not been made. Additionally, there are two types of identification. Positive is confirmed by scientific method using visual identification by next of kin or relative, comparison of dental records, DNA, x-rays, internal hardware, surgical implants, and/or fingerprints. Presumptive identification by by non-scientific method, such as personal effects, i.e. credit cards or wallets, circumstances, characteristic scars or tattoos, governmental or other forms of identification with photo. If there is no identification, the decedent is an unknown person. Medical examiner policy dictates the investigator must have local police perform latent fingerprinting each day at 8 a.m. for all applicable cases. If prints are positive, the decedent is presumptively identified, and if negative, they remain unknown.
Can I make a comment to this, Andy? We're talking about fingerprints. I just want to understand, fingerprints are done for those decedents' bodies that are able to be fingerprinted. There could be instances, for example, if an individual has been in the water for a long period of time, that body is not able to be, it may not be able to be fingerprinted. So I just want to say they're fingerprinted when they're able to. Sorry, Andy, you can continue.
For the presumptive ID, the investigator must get a verification from a family or friends via a search of the Lexis database and follow up with phone calls and/or a visit to potential addresses. Additionally, the investigator may conduct general internet searches via Google, the Michigan Department of Corrections database, the Michigan Sex Offender Registry, social media, or the Detroit Police Homicide Division. After all procedures have been exhausted, and if positive ID has yet to be obtained, the decedent is listed as unknown. However, the investigator must document all pertinent information available to assist in the identification, including physical description, clothing, tattoos, moles, scars, etc. Upon positive identification, the case manager database must be updated to include the date the family next of kin is notified. Condition related to notification of next of kin. Policies and procedures state that the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office is responsible for the notification of next of kin. The investigator should search the scene for information to help with the identification of next of kin by searching mail, greeting cards, phone books, bank statements, and any method available. Once next of kin is identified, notification should be made by either telephone call, in-person visit, or notification letter. If there is no identification, the decedent is documented as an unknown person. Of the 8,068 cases, 26 were listed as unknown persons. Based on information available in the case manager database, 5 of the 26 cases received indigent cremations and are no longer at the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. In addition, 21 of the 26 are either skeletal remains or the body is in a state of significant decomposition. Additionally, for the 26 unknown decedents, we reviewed the case registration summaries to determine the documented steps that were taken to identify the decedent. Based on the documentation available in Case Manager, in 25 of 26 cases, appropriate steps were taken to identify the remains. Specifically, fingerprints were taken in a few instances for which they could be obtained. Also, odontology workups, anthropological reviews, and DNA testing were ordered. There was one case identified for which the documented case notes were partially vague.
To reiterate what Andy said, on these unknown decedents, out of the 8,068 cases that were included in the database we received, only 26 were listed as unknown. And, of the 26, 21 were skeleton remains. So only 5 actually were unknown actual bodies.
Yeah, Commissioner Bell has a question or comment.
Thank you. Quick question, please. Looking at the 10 decedents for greater than 501 days, what's the process for cremation? And at what point do you do cremation if you have bodies for that length of time? Was that ever discussed during the?
We discussed that later on in the report where we go into it. But one of our recommendations is, and I believe the medical examiner's office does have new policies and procedures where there's going to be a point in time after all due diligence is done, the body would be subject to cremation. Because as we're going to get into later in the report, we found instances where a body would come into the medical examiner's office, the next of kin was notified, then the body would still stay at the medical examiner's office because the family was trying to get funds or whatever to release the body. But there is going to be new policies and procedures where a certain point in time is going to be set, and then the bodies would be subject to county cremation. If that answers your question.
Thank you so much.
Correct.
Next is unclaimed decedents. Of the 8,068 cases, 153 were listed without a release date and had been at the MEO for over 50 days. Of these 153 cases, specifically, we noted that 38 cases remained at the medical examiner's office for a period of 50 to 100 days. 105 cases remained at the medical examiner's office for a period of 101 to 500 days. And 10 cases remained at the medical examiner's office for a period greater than 501 days. In addition to the 153 cases, there was an additional 213 decedents submitted for county cremations as a result of either next of kin not being identified or located, or the next of kin approved a county cremation. To perform our assessment, we judgmentally selected a total sample of 29 from the 153 cases and another 23 cases from the 213 cases to review the steps taken for identifying and notifying the next of kin so the decedent could be released from the medical examiner's office or submitted for a county cremation. We obtained a copy of the case registration summary for each selected case. We then reviewed the case registration summary to determine when and what steps were taken to identify and notify next of kin. Overall, it appears that generally investigators performed sufficient due diligence in the identification and location of next of kin. However, we noted gaps in the documented progress in some of the cases. We also noted instances where the next of kin was notified, but there were lengthy delays in either removing the decedent from the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office or providing authorization for cremation by the medical examiner. We did note that since we began the engagement, the medical examiner had established a policy for the length of time a decedent will be held after notifying the next of kin. Based on our review, the medical examiner's office has not implemented procedures to, 1, develop and utilize a checklist to ensure all necessary procedures are completed and documented, and 2, monitor progress on timely identification of decedents and location of the next of kin. Delays in following or a lack of adherence to established procedures could result in decedents not being identified or the next of kin not being notified in a timely manner. Furthermore, extended delays in the identification and notification of next of kin may result in decedents remaining at the medical examiner's office for extended periods of time. Brings us to recommendation 2021-09, identified as a significant deficiency found on page 26 of our report. We recommend management within the medical examiner's office, A, continue with developing a website to enable the public to identify decedents, including a search of distinguishing identifiers such as scars or tattoos. B, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office develop, implement, and utilize a standardized checklist of required procedures and ensure that dates and results of procedures are documented in the case manager system. C, continue with oversight and monitoring of all cases either not identified or released to ensure progress is made toward release to the next of kin and or submission to the county for cremation. And D, once all due diligence is completed, follow medical examiner guidelines for submission of decedents for county cremation.
Add to for the county cremation, what happens with the county cremation? The decedent is submitted to a crematory and there's no cost to the family member. It's covered from the state of Michigan, but all the funding goes straight to either to the crematory or the funeral home for the transportation. None of the funding comes to the county. Everything is processed with the outside individuals, the crematory and the funeral home. But it's important, I believe, that individuals understand, and it may be published on the website so that they know that the county cannot maintain the bodies for an indefinite period of time because it does cost the county. We only have limited availability for space at the medical examiner's office. And if we keep some of these bodies 500 some days, it is taking space for bodies that will be coming and coming out. So it's important that, due diligence is done to notify next of kin, but then also next of kin have to do their due diligence to remove the bodies from the funeral home once the next of kin is notified.
Commissioner Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me make sure I understand this. If the next of kin is notified and they choose not to accept responsibility, then the county then takes the initiative of sending that body for cremation and the state picks up the cost. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
I would like to also add that to this particular recommendation, the county has developed a website that is operational and was immediately worked upon, and it does have the identified information, not necessarily showing tattoos, but it has descriptors of the information of a deceased. So it
Glad
is
you
a
brought that
searchable
up.
database.
I'm glad you brought that up because the website was provided to our office. You can go on the website and you can look. It has every individual that's that's still at the medical examiner's office. And you can see distinguishing marks about the individual. So if you're looking for your loved one, you could go to this website, pull up when you think maybe they may have passed away and see who's in the medical examiner's office. If the name is there, they know who the individual is. I believe the name will be listed kind of around birthday. So you can get a lot of information from the website. I think it's a great job they've done on developing this website. I think it will help the public.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Next observed condition was the next of kin protocol for the release of decedents. That is on page 27. The proper identification of the deceased is an official duty of the medical examiner. The medical examiner is ultimately responsible for notification to the next of kin. The Wayne County Medical Examiner Policies and Procedures Manual outlines the procedures for identification of the decedent and subsequent location of the next of kin. After next of kin has been contacted, it is their responsibility to contact a funeral home to make arrangements for release of the body. If the next of kin does not have the means to claim the body, they contact the medical examiner's office and complete a form for the release of the decedent's body for disposition by the medical examiner and consideration for indigent cremation. We reviewed over 115 decedent cases within the engagement scope period of October 1st, 2019 through March 2022. In several instances and in discussion with MEO personnel, we found that on occasion, inaction or a lack of efforts by the next of kin to expedite the release of the decedent from the medical examiner's office occurred. This resulted in some decedents remaining at the medical examiner's office for periods exceeding 9 months. Additionally, in several instances, while initially agreeing to complete the MEO requested release of decedent remains protocols, the next of kin did not uphold the agreement, at which time the medical examiner's office extended the maintenance period with the understanding that the next of kin was taking the necessary action, when in fact, no action had been taken by the next of kin. In October 2021, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office revised policy and procedure number B4A, identification procedures, to include timeframes for the submission of decedents for county cremation. Prior to this update, there was no formally recognized timeframe for the completion of next of kin responsibilities as they relate to the release of the decedent from the MEO for funeral or burial services, or ultimately consideration for indigent cremation. However, we found no evidence in the revised policy as to how the documented notification to the next of kin, informing them of the necessity for swift completion of the release protocols, will be implemented. As indicated previously, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office has maintained decedents for extended periods of time as a result of inactivity by the next of kin and/or a lack of communication to the Medical Examiner's Office in order to expedite the release of the decedents. Reported inaction by the next of kin places the Medical Examiner's Office in a precarious position with regard to balancing its compassion for families of the deceased and maintaining the decedent's body at the medical examiner facility, which may result in additional expense to the county for maintenance of bodies in excess of what the facility will hold. That brings us to recommendation 2021-10, found on page 27. We recommend management within the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office, A, implement the revised policy that determines a reasonable time frame for the completion of procedures by the next of kin to expedite the release of a decedent, and B, incorporate the identified time frame into a disclaimer to be included on all next of kin release documents and clearly presented on the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office website homepage, stating a decedent left unclaimed for the specified time frame may be submitted for indigent cremation.
To that point, does the department agree with the recommendations of the auditors?
The department did concur with the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
I just add to that too. There could be several instances why an individual is unclaimed. It could either be that the next of kin doesn't have the funds for the burial. It could be that the next of kin maybe was not close to the family member, doesn't want to take responsibility. And then there could also be that the next of kin could not be identified. But at least there is a process in place for those individuals that can't afford the burial, that they can be submitted for a county cremation. And it's at no cost to the county because the state is providing the funding.
My presentation is concluded. Ms. Thomas will continue. Thank you.
Good morning. I'll be picking up from objective 3, which is to assess processes for providing MEO services. This can be found on page 28 of the report, timeliness of cremation requests. Michigan Public Act 368 of 1978, section 333.248 requires the medical examiner of the county in which the death occurred to sign authorization prior to a cremation taking place. The funeral director will obtain the required permit from the medical examiner either by fax, walk-in, or through the state of Michigan's electronic death registration system, also called the EDRS, which is a web-based application used to register deaths in the state of Michigan. The primary purpose of electronic death registration system is to enable the participants of death registration to file death records with local and state registers electronically. A funeral director can request the cremation authorization electronically through the system. In order to assess the volume of cremation permits approved by surrounding counties, we were able to obtain comparative data from 2019 by reviewing the annual reports released and published on their websites for the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office of Macomb, Oakland, and Washtenaw counties. The volume of permits can be found on the bar chart within the report on page 28. We performed a review of the process and timeliness for the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office to provide the requested cremation authorization. Our review included contacting 7 funeral homes to discuss their process and experience with obtaining cremation authorizations from the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. Each funeral home stated the approval turnaround time was slow, averaging approximately 3 to 4 days when submitted through the electronic death registration system. Based on our discussion with the funeral homes and other local medical examiner offices, the standard turnaround approval time was a few hours. Therefore, we judgmentally selected 12 hours as a reasonable expected approval turnaround time. We completed a turnaround chart that can be found on page 29 of the report. By not having adequate policies and procedures in place with adequate timelines to authorize cremations timely can cause a delay in decedent's cremation and lead to additional undue stress on the decedent's family, along with potential negative publicity for the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office.
Please, can I stop you there for a second? So I think the discrepancy is the funeral homes want a few hours and we have been doing up to a few days due to probably staffing shortages and so on and so forth. But does the department agree to do this recommendation with Wayne State University when they take over?
The response that I provided was the fact that as noted, that the EDR system is in place. However, the state of Michigan does not require all end users to use the EDR system at this time. And so therefore, 12 hours, we normally within our currently is anywhere from 12 hours to 72 hours that the cremation report is currently provided. And so therefore, this is an area that is not absolutely required to do in 12 hours. I think it was an arbitrary number based on what some of the other counties do. But I also want to raise the fact that other counties do not perform the volume that Wayne County provides. And so therefore, at this point, I am not necessarily agreeing that we will move forward based on 12 hours until additional information is needed, as well as training. In order to use the EDR system, funeral directors have to be also trained, as well as the staff within the medical examiner's office have to be trained to use it. It is quicker, I will have to admit that. However, it does require the training that needs to be done. So I think that we need time to be able to do that, but not necessarily given an arbitrary number of 12 hours. I think that there needs to be some flexibility there.
So do you have any idea when the state of Michigan will mandate the use of the EDRS?
I actually called them to ask them that question. And at this point, they said that it has not yet been determined. It was started in 2017, but they have not mandated it. And so I will continue to follow up with them, but I do believe that it is an expeditious way. But I also think that we need time to make sure the necessary training, and particularly going to a new partnership, those individuals have to be trained as well.
I could also add to that too. One of our recommendations was to assign dedicated individuals that are responsible for handling the cremation permits. Because I believe at the time of our walkthroughs, we found that there was not one person responsible for clearing the queue for the EDRS system for the cremation permits, but it was whatever investigator went into the system at that time could do a cremation permit. So if we had individuals that their sole responsibility is to make sure we're processing the cremation permits, that may help process them at a quicker pace. And I think we talked about that.
Yes, and I do concur with that. And however, again, you're talking staffing. And so that we need to be sensitive to the fact of, as we move into a new situation, we have to also make sure that within the framework that we have those individuals that can be dedicated to do that. So as you know, we have 17 investigators. And so it would require an individual to be added to that, to be dedicated only to doing that. And so we're working through some of these logistics now as we're trying to develop a partnership. But it is a little premature for me to say that, yes, we can move forward at this time to do exactly what you're asking.
Just to respond to Ms. Jordan too, she indicated the volume of cremation permits that come through the county compared to other surrounding counties. As on page 28 of the report, in 2019, where Wayne County had 11,115 cremation permits processed, the second closest county was Oakland County that only had 6,890. So there is quite a discrepancy with the number of cremation permits processed. But we still would want them processed as quickly as possible.
Please proceed. Thank you.
The OAG recommends management within the medical examiner's office, A, establish and/or revise existing policies and procedures to ensure all cremation requests are processed within 12 hours or less daily, or within 24 hours on weekends and holidays, and document when the performance standard is unachievable. B, assign a dedicated person to handle all cremation requests to enhance accountability and consistency within the process. And C, inform all funeral homes to utilize the EDRS system for the submission of their cremation requests on their website. Moving right along to lack of call inquiry, complaint log, or automated systems, which can be found on page 30 of the report. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office receives telephone calls regarding complaints, inquiries from a various of sources such as family of the deceased, funeral homes, and general public. Calls received during normal business hours, which is 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., are answered by the receptionist desk and routed appropriately. Calls received after hours are forwarded to the investigator on duty. According to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office management, calls classified as inquiry and/or complaint in nature, which do not pertain to a specific case file, are not documented in Case Manager to capture the inquiry and the disposition of the call. We encounter instances where the phones at the medical examiner's office may go unanswered and/or were placed on hold for an extended period of time. Nor does it appear that the medical examiner office has an automated phone system which would allow transferring of calls to responsible parties within the medical examiner's office. We recommend management within the medical examiner's office, A, establish policies and procedures for the MEO personnel for receipt and logging of all inquiry complaint calls during business hours. B, establish policies and procedures for handling of after-hour inquiry complaint calls. And C, establish a log to track all inquiry complaint calls to include the names of both the individual making the inquiry as well as the decedent who is the subject of the request. In addition, the disposition resolution of the inquiry call should also be noted for future review and work with IT to implement an automated phone system.
And this is the area where the public is calling the medical examiner's office. So I think this is important that we're able to, when a call comes in, we can ensure that it's tracked and a response is provided to the individual. So we know who's calling in and that they are getting the responses that they're looking for. And I think when an individual calls the medical examiner's office and the phone goes unanswered or placed on holds for lengthy time, it is hard on the decedent's family to have to, they're dealing with enough, but then to deal with not being able to get to who they need to get information from is important.
Moving right along, implement services request tracking system, formalized request process. This can be found on page 31 of the report. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office provides several types of services to the public, such as providing copies of autopsy reports, photographs, pathology slides, toxicology reports, cremation permits, and proof of death reports or statements. According to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office management, a written request is provided to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office by the requesting parties. These requests are primarily received via mail. Based on our review, we found some of these requests could not be completed as submitted, primarily because payment was not provided along with the request. In these cases, we also noted that the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office has a form letter that is returned to the requesting party stating payment must be remitted before the service can be performed. We also noted that some medical examiner's office have websites that list the services they provide, fees for the service, and online portals for the ordering and payment of some services, such as autopsy and toxicology reports for cremation permits. Our review of the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office service request processes disclose that there is no formal mechanism in place to log and track these service requests. The lack of a request form and associated fee schedule on the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office website hinders the efficient processing of service requests from the public. Also, by not implementing a formal service request tracking process diminishes management oversight of services being completed and increase the risk of requests for service not being fulfilled and/or being fulfilled on a timely basis. Therefore, the OAG recommends the Medical Examiner's Office management within their office work with the Department of IT to A, make available on their website a request form that the public can utilize when requesting a service, as well as a list of associated fees per service. as well as B, implement a formal service request tracking system for all incoming requests for services. This system should capture information such as the date a service request was received, payment information, type of service being requested, the staff member assigned to complete the service, the date the service was completed, as well as when the requested service documentation was returned to the requested party. Moving right along, policies and procedures over personal property not always followed and could be strengthened. This can be found on page 32 of the report. The Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office policies and procedures obligate the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office to ensure the integrity of evidence, records, and property through written electronic documentation. This serves as a record of the physical possession of items brought into and released by the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. Property that is brought in with the body must be identified, removed, stored, and released under a proper chain of custody. These procedures can be found numbered as 1 through 3 on page 33 of the report. Based on our review of the procedures, the controls over the safeguarding of the property appears reasonable, but could be enhanced by requiring a second verification of property obtained and documented in the case manager system as received. Not ensuring that policies and procedures are followed related to the documenting of personal property received at the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office on a decedent and adequate segregation of duties related to the safeguarding of personal property could result in the risk of misappropriation of personal property in appearance or in fact. We recommend the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office develop and implement the following policies and procedures. A specific personal property detail is to be consistently documented in the case registration summaries, case manager, property logbook, and the property envelopes, including detailed property description, disposition of property and field when obtained and when released and who it was released to. B, requiring an independent verification of property obtained and documented in the property logbook and electronic case manager database. Emergency operating plan not communicated. This can be found on page 34 of the report. We noted on April 12, 2022, that the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office lost total internet access for approximately 10 hours between 2 a.m. until 12 noon. Based on discussions with both the chief investigator and the administrative manager, it became apparent that they were not aware if there was an emergency operating plan in place to address the MEO procedures due to a loss of internet service. Upon further review, it was noted that the medical examiner's office 2021 through 2022 continuity of operations plan contained procedures to be followed in the event of a network failure. However, it does not appear that this contingency plan was communicated to the Wayne County Medical Office staff. Loss of internet access prevents the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office from providing their services to the public, including families of decedents and funeral homes. Therefore, the OAG recommends the Medical Examiner's Office management distribute to all staff the emergency operating plan to address the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office operations in light of an extended loss of internet phone access. This plan may include, but not limited to, contact information for area hospitals and funeral homes for proper notification. Secondly, use of backup cell phones in the office. And thirdly, procedures to be followed by all staff until internet access is reestablished. This will conclude my recommendation and presentation. With permission of the chair, I would like to turn it over to the Auditor General, Marcella Cora, for the conclusion and any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Cora.
In our engagement, we spent a considerable amount of time at the medical examiner's office, going through case files, going through case summaries, trying to determine what processes and procedures are in place at the medical examiner's office. We determined that there's areas within the internal control environment, as well as operational procedures that could be strengthened. We found we had 15 findings, 33 recommendations that would help strengthen the controls and processes if implemented. I just also wanted to thank Mrs. Jordan, the Director of Health, Human and Veteran Services, and all the individuals at the medical examiner's office that was able to work with us in this engagement, help us understand their processes, and hope that our recommendations can help not only in the future, but any future contracts with the county. If the recommendations are implemented as part of the contract, it will help the medical examiner's office. We will request a corrective action plan within 30 days, and we'll follow up to ensure what corrective action has taken place. But in many instances, corrective action has already been implemented and started by the department.
Comment from Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much. We have implemented a number of the recommendations in terms of, first of all, we have developed the response for the telephones. And so there is an automated phone system that has been set up and has been addressed. In addition to working with the Office of the Auditor Generals and being able to work with each of the individuals here. It was a very collaborative experience and we worked very closely together. I actually shadowed Michael as well as Andrew and Crystal at the medical examiner's office as they did their work and sat in and tried to be as helpful as I possibly could. And so again, I certainly do agree that there are a number of things that we certainly can strengthen and we will continue to do that work, as well as being able to make sure that we're giving the best, most timely and safe and committed and compassionate care to the residents here in Wayne County. So we are committed to doing that and we'll follow through with the recommendations, as well as continue to strengthen the work and the relationship with the Auditor General's office in all areas of audits. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive and file? Commissioner Kling.
I'll be prepared to make that motion, Mr. Chair, but just as a comment on what we have seen today from the Auditor General, one of the words that kept coming up again and again for me was oversight when we look at the issues that have come up. And oversight, I guess, can kind of come in two flavors. You know, there's been discussion about what we need in the operating agreement with Wayne State University to help with some of these areas that have been identified here. And that's okay to put in a contract, but unless there's oversight on the contract, it doesn't mean a whole lot necessarily. And we've seen some of that with the U of M contract today in the audit. So the executive branch does have the responsibility of overseeing their contracts, and that is properly their role. But the ultimate oversight is this body that represents the citizens of Wayne County. And what I am suggesting here, because we've heard some stuff, you know, okay, we've got the website up and going, and we've dealt with some of the issues that the Auditor General raised. I think that needs to be reported to the commission. We have talked about this in terms of, or at least I have raised it when we've had conversations about the Wayne State Agreement, that I think there needs to be reporting to the Wayne County Commission and through that to the people of Wayne County in terms of the issues that have been raised here. So I think when we go into the operational agreement and that comes before us, I would like to discuss what kind of reporting is going to come to the Wayne County Commission and what is the essential information that we're looking for, perhaps quarterly, perhaps semi-annually. I don't want to nail that down necessarily today. But I think there needs to be a formal report that comes to the Wayne County Commission to go over some of these numbers that we're talking about here. Some of these issues have gone on for a long time. One of the reasons that we did historically go get a contract with the University of Michigan 11 or so years ago, is because we knew we had some of these issues internally in the county and we needed the help. And now all of those have not gone away. Building issues, we've sort of known about that for a long time, but freezing pipelines in the winter, that's never been reported to the commission that we've had those kind of issues over there. So I think we should be looking in the agreement, the operational agreement with Wayne State University, some reporting requirements. I think to a certain extent, the Auditor General's report today can be a little bit of a blueprint of some of the things that should be in there, but there will be other items. So I think this goes to strong oversight and transparency with the public. And those are the two key things for me when it comes to the operational agreement coming up, that we as a commission are getting the data that is important to have publicly so the public knows what's going on. But also some of these internal matters, yeah, we can say we have provisions to take care of, some of the procedures and everything internally that we have that going on, but that also has to be verified, and that's oversight. Because we see that all the time. Yeah, we have a procedure, but we can't get to it for one reason or another. So that's the comment I wanted to make today, Mr. Chair, getting this very comprehensive report today. But what matters in the long run is oversight and transparency to the public. And I want to make sure that that is definitely strengthened in this area when we get into the operational agreement.
Thanks you for your comment. Chair Bell has a comment or question.
Yeah, really quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank the Auditor General's Office for this thorough report. As you know, this has been of utmost importance to the commission and to the public. And we are glad that you have brought many things to our attention and that the administration has already started to implement some of the items that are in the report. To Commissioner Colleen's point about transparency and oversight, I have scheduled the COW for mid-September where the operating agreement will be before us. Granted, everything goes on schedule, it'll be mid-September, but looking at a partnership is what we'll be looking at with Wayne State to make sure that we're more involved at a operational level, as an oversight and transparency level. So I look forward to that partnership agreement that'll come before us, or operating agreement that will come before us. But the key word is going to be is a partnership between Wayne County and Wayne State to make sure that we are on top of the things that unfortunately got a little bit beneath us and for us in this current report. So thank you to the OAG's office again for your thorough, comprehensive reporting. And I look forward to the implementation of these items, especially as we move forward with Wayne State. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kleen made a motion. Commissioner Coleman seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Next item, Madam Clerk.
We need direction for item 2.
If I could request item number 2 to be passed for the day.
I'll tell you what, can I get a motion to pass number 2 for the day? Okay, support. Supported by Commissioner Dobb. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item.
F, such other matters as may be properly submitted before the committee.
There are none today. Next item.
Public comments.
Could you unmute folks and is anybody from the public who would like to comment? Going once. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? Third time. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment? Okay, next item, Madam Clerk.
Adjournment.
I get it. It's been moved and supported. All those in favor?